Welcome to the Brew Pod. I'm here with Lisa Chin, coach, writer, and podcaster. Hi, Lisa.
Hi, Bree. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. So glad to be here.
Yes, I'm so honored to have you on the Brew Pod with me today. And I just want you to share, just so our listeners know, a little bit about you.
Sure. So, as you said, I am a coach, writer, and podcaster. I'm also a mom to 3 living children. And I'm also an employee, a sister, a wife, a daughter, and kind of all those roles wrapped up into one. And I would say that kind of what sums me up is I try to live an inspired life. And through kind of my self-identity journey, that's kind of what I've come to is to chase, follow, stalk my curiosities and inspirations, and to just create things that call to be created.
Wow, that's so cool. And I love the fact that you have a podcast of your own. I know that when we first talked and before this, episode came out, we talked for a long time. It was really cool. You're just so interesting. So I love the fact that you have a podcast.
Thank you. I just hit 500 downloads today, so I'm super excited.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Props to you. So I wanted to touch base. You know how we have resolutions, and everybody each year tries to make their resolutions, try to follow through. I want to know your take on resolutions and what you think about them.
Sure. So I think that each and every one of us has to decide what works for us. And we have to try things in order for that to happen. So, what's kind of fed to us, the narrative is that, you make goals, you write them down, you make them, what is that? There's an acronym for goals. It's like simple or stupid, or I forget the acronym, but it's like keep them simple and keep them like quantifiable and all of that stuff. And I kind of, I went to like a business school, and it's very like strategic, and so goals are something that we should really have set for ourselves. And so for a very long time I kind of did that. I was never a word that you used earlier when we were chatting before we started recording was militant. Like I was not really militant in general, but even with resolutions, I would just say like, oh, I want to go to the gym a little more. And some people would say, well, you're not being specific enough. That's one of the acronyms. S was for specific. You're not being specific enough when you're making your resolutions. And I mean, I would try. I'd be like, oh, the gym 3 times. And then I'm like, I don't feel like going to the gym. And then, by the time like January 20th or whatever comes around, you just kind of forget about your resolutions. And that's kind of how things went. But I would say that I wasn't unhappy or unhealthy or unfulfilled because I found ways to do the things that I wanted to do without kind of tying them into goals and resolutions. And then I want to say about 6 or 7 years ago, I think the podcast is Being Boss, and I was listening to it, and they were talking about how they have a word for the year. And so I was thinking, that's pretty interesting. Like I hadn't heard of that before. And what if I tried that? And that was about 2015, I want to say. I didn't really have a word. Maybe I had a word picked out, but it was kind of like a loosey-goosey thing. And then it was maybe February or March. I was six months postpartum. I wasn't 6 months postpartum. I was much longer than 6 months postpartum at that point. But I was heading off to an appointment, and I just like kind of gotten back into the groove of things. And I was listening to another podcast, and it was kind of talking. They were talking to Hal Elrod, who founded the Miracle Morning. He wrote that book, but he was talking, and then kind of this like a bunch of thoughts swirled into my head, and the question of who am I kind of like popped into my head, and I was like driving, and I was like, I don't know who I am. Like, how do I answer this question? I'm like freaking out at the wheel, and I almost like pull over to be like, why don't I know this? And it was just such a significant moment. I pulled over. I was like, I didn't pull over. I kind of, I went to my appointment, and I had a little bit of time to think about it. And I realized that I didn't really know this question, the answer to this question. And so that first year, I set my word for the year as self-identity. So I guess it's more of a term. Um, and that was kind of how I lived for the whole year. That was kind of what I lived and breathed, was self-identity. Everything I read, listened to, looked at, experienced, thought of was through the lens of like, what does this mean about me? And I didn't really know what I was trying to do the whole time. I just knew that I needed to kind of learn more about myself in a way that I hadn't been taught or told to. And so I just did that. And then it was kind of like a little over a year after that, I all of a sudden at nighttime, I was going to bed and then I was like, oh, live an inspired life. And so like through just all the various writing that I was doing and classes I was taking and personality tests, like every personality test on Facebook that came through my Facebook feed that year, I took. And it was just and that's kind of, I guess, how it started. And then every year since then, I've chosen a word for the year.
Wow. Like, first off, I think that's amazing that you found that and came upon it. I think it is kind of funny though that you're like, who am I now? Because that's probably a shock. Like, I don't even know who I am. Like that, I feel like that would be intense. But I feel like you pulled like self-identity and learning about yourself versus resolutions. And you think of them like, I'm gonna be really honest with you. When every year I'd have like a family member or someone on Facebook be like, I'm going to have my resolutions. And I stopped. Eventually, one year, I'm just like, I do not accomplish what I say I'm going to. So I'm just not going to do this. but, um, but I love your perspective. And I think this year I'm going to try it out. So, what I'm curious about with this is like, from the time that you were doing resolutions to the time now of picking a word and going with that, what have you learned about yourself from that?
Oh, I think that resolutions work for some people, and I think that they don't work for some people. And actually, I recently have gotten into human design, and so I was following someone, and they were talking about business goals, and they said that like one of the lower right arrow, I forget what it's called, but if the arrow is pointing right, then your goals should be very like amorphous. They're kind of loose and you have an idea, but it's not very specific. And then to the left, it's very specific. Or it's either that way or switched, whatever. But there's two groups, right? And that arrow signals it. So if anyone who knows about human design or I don't know is interested, you can go take a test and you can look at that lower right arrow. And my accountability partner that I work with, we've been kind of using it a little bit as a tool in kind of helping each other with our businesses and whatnot and our creative journeys. And she is the complete opposite of me. And I'm like, this makes so much sense. Like you are so on top of things. And I'm kind of like, oh, I'll get this done. And I don't really know how many listeners I want or whatever it may be. Like I kind of throw out numbers, but yeah, I'm not really tied to it. And it just makes so much sense. And I think like it's part of the process of like, okay, well, I've never heard of using a word for the year. That sounds interesting. I mean, the worst thing you can do is just try. and what are you going to do? You're probably not going to fail. If like I actually teach a class on this and I'm pretty loose about it. I say, hey, you can always change your word for the year. When we make resolutions, it always feels like you set it and like that's it and you can't change it. Like there's no flexibility with it. And honestly, like we live lives that are changing by the second. So one day you could have a job and the next day you don't. So what are you gonna do with your gym membership? Like you can't, if your resolution is to go to the gym 5 days a week and then you end up not, like, is that gonna, so I think it's just really being flexible and it gives us the ability to just recognize like that it's more of a lifestyle, I would say. So like when I was doing this whole self-identity thing, it permeated everything. Like when I was having discussions with people, it just gave me this like different lens in how I was approaching the world. Can I share a little bit about this year and what my word was?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. So this year, I kind of came in, I taught my class, and then I kind of had a word, and honestly, I forget what it was. It didn't really stick with me. And it was kind of like, around February, the word play came to mind. And it was probably because I was trying to play with my children and was having a hard time doing it. And I was like, all right, play. It feels to me, I go with the feeling, which a resolution is not. I go with a feeling, and it felt like, okay, play is the word for me. And so I was, I've been playing video games with my husband. I'm trying to play with the kids a little more, trying to be more playful in general. And then it was about halfway through the year. It was summertime. I was actually at my in-laws, visiting them, and my son had this like huge. We were watching the Olympics. I really wanted to watch the women's 4x4 relay. I was like, of course, it was like the highlight of the event that day of the events, and they left it till like the last event. It's like a 2-minute race, of course, and they and they leave it until, it's like 9:55. I'm like, when is this really gonna happen? And so my 4-year-old, I kept him up way too late, and he completely like just lost it because he was so tired, and I felt so bad. But I also was like super triggered by it. And what happened was, I finally got him to sleep. I was journaling and writing. I write through a lot of things, and I realized, and then what I've been doing a lot this year is kind of doing like inner child work on myself, and I kind of did that, and then I was writing about it, and then as I was writing, I realized that the idea of play wasn't really what I had been thinking about all along. This year, like to play, physically with toys or video games or whatever. It was to let my inner child, like to heal my inner child so that she could play, and that I can be an adult and take care of things. And I can also play too, but to have that part of me that gets like, these moments that feel triggering, to kind of heal her and let her do what she's supposed to do, and to let me kind of take the reins. So this has been the evolution of it. And it's really beautiful because you don't get that with resolutions, like the growth that happens. And there's like one of my friends, she does like there's a book called like the 12-week year. And that's pretty interesting because you break your year up into quarters, and then you can set new goals along the way, which just sounds like a lot of work to me. But yeah, exactly. But with a word, you can just, it evolves with you. You can kind of change as you change, your lens changes, and then you can interpret that word in a kind of a new way. And that's just been like a really beautiful journey.
Oh, I love that journey. I think that even though, I know you just said how like there's that planner that you could do like 4 different things. I feel like your word though goes so much deeper. No offense to whatever practice you do with resolutions, it's definitely anyone listening, it's your choice. But with the word, to me, it just sounds so much deeper because like you said, at first you started off with play and feeling that was like playing with your children and such. But then you found out it was deeper, like with your inner self. And that to me is so amazing because even just when, like for myself, I go to therapy and such, even just learning something from that's such a huge healing method and technique too. So I love it. I'm definitely going to do it this year.
I'm so excited.
Yeah. I wanted to share. So after we talked about this, pre the consultation, I was thinking in my own words, and I think we talked about this too, of like what words I would have probably chosen for this year. And we were talking about how a lot I've noticed, especially with episodes, is that perfectionism came up a lot, and learning like what is perfectionism and how do I use that in my life. And then I think we discussed how I was thinking about selfish and what does that actually mean? And is it really bad? Because we have this negative connotation around selfishness. So it really, I feel like just talking to you the first time about this, you made me go back and think like, did I have a word, this year? So I really thank you for that clarity because I ended up going back and be like, yeah, I actually did have a couple words this year.
That's awesome.
So, sorry.
Oh, no, it's okay. I mean, it's also just never too late too, because it keeps it open. Like I said, I had a word and then I changed it, and I've done that I think a couple of times now. Which is, like I said, I'm not like a militant person. Like when I coach, I'm kind of like, you I'm not gonna blame you or shame you. This is not my style. So, and, and I always say, like, if you want results guaranteed, that's not how I am. In terms of like, if you want to like be very specific and say, I want to do this thing by this time, like, I think that there's a coach for you to do that, but that's not me. Like, if you want to come to me and you want to kind of go on a journey and see where it goes, that's more my jam. That's kind of how I flow.
That's cool. I love that. What I wanted to ask you is, have you thought about what you're gonna have for a word this year? Have you?
Oh, um, some thoughts have come to mind, and some thoughts like integrity is a word that I had last year. It was kind of in the forefront, and then there was another word recently that I had thought about, but it usually is a process. And I'm still so deep. I feel even though we only have a few weeks left to the year, I feel like I'm still so deep in 2021, and I have to like emerge out of it a little bit and like create some distance for me to figure out what that might be. But integrity is not going to be it, but I'm just using that as an example. Community was a word a couple of years ago. And yeah, and I think it's like there's no like rules for it. It could be an
Yeah.
adjective, it could be a noun, it could be a feeling, it could be whatever. And it could be just like a sensation, like literally like and like your word for the year could just be like, I want to feel the way that I feel when I eat ice cream. Like whatever whatever that feeling is, or when I hear someone um, you know, playing the guitar. Like that could be the feeling that you're going after. And for me, the best way I'm a writer, so like the best way for me to capture that is through a word.
I love that. I like also that you talked about how there's no rules because technically, I guess when it doesn't have to be like January 1st, 2022. I'm gonna have a word, but I would want you to share. What advice would you give those that want to try this out on picking a word? Because there's a lot of words, as you know, out there that
Yeah.
it's like, I want all these words. So, how do you kind of break it down for yourself and be like, you know what, this word really resonates for me?
Yeah. I think there's a couple of different things that you can do. I mean, one way is just to kind of ask for signs. So you could ask for signs, like all day tomorrow, I'd like signs for a word. And then you could be in conversation with someone and they say something, and then you read a magazine article and it says something else, and then you're watching a YouTube video and it's something else. So I think that that's a one way of doing it, like just getting signs and like things that resonate with you, because like once you put it out there, then your brain, I mean, whether you believe in the law of attraction or not, like scientifically your brain does look for confirmation of whatever it is that you want to do. So whether you veer on the side of more pragmatic or more out there, it can work for you. You can also just think back to the previous, like this past year, and like think what you would have wanted to be different and how you could have made that different in a way. Like, obviously, that not trying to be like controlling about it, but if like your attitude could have been different, like what could have, like if I could have been more positive, so positivity could be a word, or organized because I was so disorganized, and maybe organized isn't the word because maybe you're not supposed to be an organized person, and maybe it's just to be structured or to keep track, to like have email folders or something like that. It's just that it if you think about it, like the past year, that can certainly point you towards the coming year. Or you can look forward and think, okay, what's in the coming year and how do I want to feel? And like, what maybe there are things you want to accomplish that are very concrete. And say, well, how do I need to be in order to accomplish that? And what would I feel when I accomplish that? And like the words that kind of come up in that way, like it can in those questions that you ask can help you kind of generate what that word or words can be. Because you could also have multiple words. Like honestly, it's not, again, no hard and fast rules.
I think that's great. I mean, I want to know for you when you do your words, do you journal at the end or do you like journal throughout or do you kind of keep it like a mental note? Like, what do you do with your word?
My word for the year.
Yeah, sorry.
Well, usually when I figure it out, it's kind of like a eureka moment. So I usually, the way that I process is I write. So I'll write it to kind of solidify the thought process. Like for instance, when to live an inspired life came to mind, I whipped out my phone. It was like 1 o'clock in the morning. I whipped out my phone and I opened up my Google document that I journal in because as a young mom, I was what can just be like computer all the time. So I whipped out my phone and I just started typing. So you could take out like your notes function on your phone or like grab a piece of paper or whatever. Um, but that allows me to kind of capture like the feelings that I have during that time because the thing is words have their definition, but then they have a connotation to it. And connotations are very nuanced and they're also in the body of the interpreter, right? So like the way
Yeah.
that amazing feels in my body is not going to be the same as it feels in your body. And so like that enables me to kind of capture that feeling. And then I do journal about it throughout the year because I have it as a lens. It's not like the first thing that comes to mind, but in the back of my mind, I'm thinking like, how does this play into my word for the year? I have this like board above my desk and has a bunch of words in it. Community actually is still from there still up there from a couple of years ago, but play is also on there. And seeing that and kind of keeping in mind, I mean, if you're an artist or if you like doodling or whatever, like doodle it on a piece of paper, frame it, put it on the wall. I mean, have fun with it. If you like do embroidery, like embroider it and put it on something, on your couch or something like that. But it's kind of you do whatever you want to do and you interpret it however you want. The way that I do it is I do think about it throughout the year because I give myself permission to change it if it doesn't work.
Yeah.
But I mean, by like mid-year, it's pretty much set, and then I can kind of like look at different ways of interpreting it, kind of like what happened with the play.
That's so cool. It really is. Like this whole concept to me, I really didn't, I don't think I've really heard of it before. Not until recently with you. And it just sounds so exciting. Like I'm no joke gonna be doing this for the word of the year. Um, so I'm excited. I'm so happy that you've come on and shared your point of view and like what you've done with your words and the fact that you've been doing it for years now. I think that's so cool. Like your journal, whether it's on your doc or wherever, has to be really intriguing because of all the stuff that you learned for that word. So I admire you. That's
Oh,
so
thank
cool.
you.
So I wanted to have you share for people looking, because I know you talked about how you do coaching. For people looking for you, where can they find you?
Well, my blog and my website is called Lisa for Real, so just all spelled out, and I write daily in it, um, and has my email. You can email me at lisa@lisaforreal.com. I'm also on Instagram at Reclaiming Motherhood, so that's one word, and you can DM me there. And then if you want to learn a little bit more about me, you can also listen to my podcast, which is All the Things. So if you search All the Things with Lisa Chin, you should be able to find me as well.
That's perfect. And I did actually, right after we talked, I went and checked out a couple of your blogs and I just thought, I love your voice. You're external and now that I have your voice in my mind, I can hear you speaking your words. So that's cool.
That's awesome. Thank you for reading.
Yeah. So as you know, I usually have mantras and I've been having my guests share their own mantra with everyone. So I'd love for you to share what mantra would you leave with our guests today?
So there is a quote that I quote very often, and I always misquote. I always like missay it. So I did pull it up beforehand. It's a quote from Wayne Dyer, who's like the godfather of self-development. And I was fortunate enough to see him speak a few years before he passed. And the quote is, how people treat you is their karma, and how you react is yours. And the I don't exactly remember the first time I learned that, but I remember the feeling I had when I heard that and finally understood what it meant, and it has informed my life in so many different ways. I don't know, have you heard that quote before?
I've heard like quotes around that quote, but not that particular one. Yeah.
Mm. Yeah, it changes the outlook because
Yeah.
it means that you have complete control over how you react. And you're separate than other people in that if you cause someone to flip out, that's not on you necessarily. It's really that's just how they are reacting. And with my understanding of trauma and whatnot, it and also being a parent, it's helped me in that process as well. But it really has that single quote has changed me as a person.
Yeah, I definitely think that the perspective, again, you always bring me such insights. It's beautiful. I love it. Yeah, I love this mantra, and I think that um, I'm going to do some pondering on it for myself as well, because you don't think of it like that. You always think that um, it's fully on yourself if you're the opposite of it. So yeah, thank you
You're
for
welcome.
sharing that. Well, I'm really honored to have you on here, and hopefully we'll have another in the future together.
I would love
Um,
that.
yeah. So, for all of my listeners, with this, you are loved, you are worthy, you are cherished, and we are proud of you. Until next time on the Brave Pod. Bye.